Welcome to Scott's Boring Podcast. Welcome back, or maybe it's your first time. Maybe you're just here because you're a friend of Christy's or Kevin's, and you just want to hear the song that we recorded. A beautiful performance by Christy. She's here in the studio. We recorded a song quickly, live, and it went really well, I thought. I really genuinely enjoyed recording Christy, and that can be heard at the end of this podcast. So I want to say that right away, because maybe you're a friend of Christy's or a family member, or maybe this is in like 20 years from now, and you're Christy, future Christy, and you just want to hear the song. You don't want to hear Scott talk. Skip to the end. You have to really fucking move along, because this is a long podcast. If you're going to stick with me to the end, strap in. I hope you're on a long road trip, or you're mowing a big lawn, or you have a long shift at work and you have your headphones in, because this is a long one. What you're in for, is a conversation between me, Christy Vandenberg, and Kevin Robson. Who are these people? Christy is a friend. Both of them are friends from, childhood, teen years. We grew up together out east. I see Christy maybe every 5 years or something. Always happy to see her. A very beautiful person inside and out. And Kevin, you know Kevin already. Already did a podcast with him. Excuse me. So I see Kevin like, 5-6 times a year. So often enough. He's a good buddy. So we all had a visit. We all know each other, don't see each other too often. We all visited here at my place. I have the studio. It makes sense that I would record Christy, and it makes sense that we do the podcast. So we did that. We spent the day together. We climbed a mountain, caught up, had a lot of great conversations. And then when it came podcast time, it was interesting, man. Like, sometimes you press the record button and people open up, the floodgates open. And then other times they shut down a little bit. So this was all about Christy, and I think she might have was a little bit more reserved, shut down. She was available, and I enjoyed it, talking to her in the podcast form, but I think she was a little bit more open and lucid when the record button wasn't on. Why do I mention that? Well, because later that night, she picks up the guitar, and I'm like, there it is. Then she opened up. She sang a song, and it was beautiful. So the next morning, actually this morning, from when I'm speaking to you right now, we recorded it, this live off the floor. And it was tricky in a way for me, because I've been away for so long, and the studio was just not functional. But I did my best, and I really enjoyed it. It was a beautiful performance. And if you're here to hear that song, if that's why you tuned into the podcast and you don't want to hear idle chit chat for like 2 hours just to get to the song, I'm telling you now, just skip up ahead. It's right at the end. The last part, the last 3 minutes of this podcast is the song. So if you're not in the mood to hear chit chat, skip ahead. But if you're going to stick around, I'm happy you do, because it's I had a fun conversation learning about Christy a little bit. She lived a self-sustaining lifestyle for 6 years in what the fuck's it called, Kootenai, in the interior, and a really interesting person. I'd like to have a podcast with her again, maybe one-on-one, and I think she'd be into that, and then maybe do some live songs live during the podcast. I think that'd be fun. But at this rate, I guess it'll be in 5 years from now, because I only see her every 5 years. Hopefully sooner this time. I have to apologize to Kevin because his mic wasn't live. I feel so bad. Sorry, Kev. But you can still hear him. So you're like, why is Kev kind of quiet? It's because actually his mic's not live, and it's Christy's mic picking him up. So I screwed up there. Quickly, very quickly, and then we'll get to the podcast. We'll get to the conversation with Christy and Kevin. But it's just quickly, it's because it's been a while since the last episode. What have I been up to? Well, by golly, I've been traveling a lot. And I won't get into it right now because I'm going to have a podcast dedicated to talking about my thoughts and memories and feelings on the trip that I had. 5 weeks. Just quickly. Rome, Israel, Cyprus, Majorca, Lisbon, Porto, Paris, Lille, Bruges, Amsterdam, home. It was a big trip. I think 15 different hotels and 3 different events, work events. So I'm going to talk all about that in another podcast. I think it'll be interesting because it won't just be the good and the bad, warts and all, you know. Kind of honest thoughts on that. Some good, some bad. Traveling, man. It's interesting. But I'm home now and kind of scrambling to get things organized, the home stuff, and trying to get on top of that because we're taking off again. So I'm doing my best. I'm doing okay. I'm getting things done, and I'm doing good. So, moving right along. So, the future podcast, we'll have, I'm going to talk about the trip. And then after that, what I'm going to do is do whatever it is, maybe 12 podcasts in a row, which are an audiobook. Me reading the audiobook Rocked Up, the book I wrote with Karina. Why would I do such a thing? Well, I'll tell you why. Because I fucking did it. It's done. Well, why don't I just upload it to Audible, where you would make money off of it, and people can buy it, an audiobook? Well, Karina doesn't have time to do her part because she's writing other books, and it makes sense that she would put her time into that. It's a very time-consuming thing to narrate. So, in the meantime, I thought it'd be fun to put it on the podcast. So each chapter, it actually reads, you could go through the story, but it's just one perspective, through the male perspective, the male character. I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be interesting. And also you'll be kind of my proofreader or proof listener. So email me if you hear something weird, because then it gives me a chance to fix it before I actually put it up for sale as an audiobook. So that should be kind of fun. And it's easy for me because I am going to be narrating another audiobook. This is a much longer one. It's going to take me about a month I have to be very single-minded and for a month of my life focusing on this to do it properly. So I'm going to do that. So in the meantime, that'll keep the podcast episodes coming. And I hope you check it out. I hope you get into the story. It's kind of fun. It's not a serious story. We're not going to get win any awards for this one, man. But it's fun, and I think you might get into it and get some joy out of it. So check it out. Next podcast, talking about the travels I recently had. After that, it's going to be about a dozen. Each one will be a chapter of the book. All right. So, something I did want to mention is I told a bad joke about 3/4 of the way through, and I'm known for making bad jokes. You know, some people that don't know me very well might not know that I have that kind of off-color side of me. I like bad jokes, and I'm not ashamed of it. I like good jokes too. I prefer the good ones, but you gotta take the good with the bad. Anyway, I told the joke didn't land very well, and Christy did not like it. Like, if there was a video here, I wish there was, because she was like recoiling and curling down on herself. And I was like, fuck it, I'm finishing this joke. I started it. And anyway, the only reason I mentioned this is that after the podcast, she said that she really didn't like that joke and she thought I should edit it out. And I mention it because it's really important to me that if somebody comes in this windowless, dark room for a podcast or to record a song, it's really important. That's a high level of trust, I think. So if somebody comes in here, I think I have a responsibility there. So let's say, for example, if they said something they wanted me to edit it out, I certainly would. Or if it's a take, like a vocal take that wasn't perfect, that I thought they wasn't complimentary, I'd get rid of it. But I decided to keep it. So the bad joke is there. And the reason I bring it up, because I want you to know that Christy didn't like it. She thought it was offensive, and it doesn't represent her at all. It doesn't represent me either. I think it's just a bad joke, a little slip of the tongue, whatever. So warts and all, man, you're going to hear the whole thing without any edits. Because, whatever, man. That's life. Sometimes life, you tell a bad joke. Whatever. But Christy does not approve of the joke. And I don't mind leaving it in also because at the very end, she said, I don't like it. So, like, there's no questioning that Christy did not approve. So there that is. So let's talk to Chris. Let's get into this podcast. Let's do it. Thanks for being here. Again, if you want to get to the song, just skip to the end, but I hope you don't. I hope you stick around. And right now, listen to me, Christy Vandenberg, my buddy Kev, have a chat. Hang out with us.
You want me to count 3 or something like a movie?
That's just kind of how it happened.
Things like that do happen.
Yeah. So what we should be doing is introducing ourselves. So, Chrissy, if you look at that, so I'll introduce you for you.
Okay.
This is Christy Vandenberg. So the best advice I think I've ever received in my life is from a friend named Greg Rebadou. And this is the advice. You ready?
I like Greg.
Me too. He's very smart. He's always been ahead of his time in a way. A little smarter than his time anyway. But anyway, this is the advice. If Williamstown Fair, I was a little overwhelmed with seeing people and they say, hey, how's it going? What have you been up to? And they have to have the same conversation 100 times over again. And you haven't seen these people in like 20 years. So it's like, well, a whole fucking lot's happened. I don't know what to cover here. And he said, man, just talk about the last 24 hours. And I thought that was good advice. So if I see someone now and I'm like, oh, fuck, I haven't seen Aunt Debbie since 93. What do we say here? Just talk about the last 24 hours. Simple advice. It's really helped me. So right now it's going to help us because we can just talk about the last 24 hours. And when we spent the day together, we climbed a mountain. We went out for duck wings. We probably had about 20 awesome podcast conversations. So I thought maybe we could just talk about our day and the conversations we had today. Just breeze over them. And see which ones we kind of want to go over again. Christy has lived off grid in the mountains in interior British Columbia, and that's super interesting. So we talked about that a little bit. I don't know anybody who would find that uninteresting. It's weird talking about yourself though, but I tell you this much, man, once you get into it a bit, it feels good. It feels good because people are interested.
I normally have to pay people to talk about yourself.
Well, that's free.
Counseling.
I kind of wanted to just interject for a moment just to touch back on something we were talking about a few moments ago. I can't find any information on
Bixby?
Bixby. Yeah, no, I think it's actually just they were on Epiphones beforehand, and people seemed kind of shocked that they started on Gibson guitars. Anyway,
I put this on myself.
Oh, well,
it didn't come stock like that.
Okay,
I should have mentioned that, right?
Yeah, maybe slowed the search down a little bit.
And interfered with the Googling. Yeah, Bixby tailpiece dates back from the 50s for sure, and it doesn't stay in tune terribly well, but it's super cool, man, and it looks cool. Definitely worth talking about.
The thing I heard a lot of people because Mark D, who we all know, he used to have an old arch top, and he had the damnedest time trying to keep the thing in tune all the time.
Yeah, they're not known for that. It changes the way it plays big time. The tension across the strings is very different.
They're beautiful guitars.
You know what Christy did? She killed a rabbit. No,
A few rabbits.
But whenever you live off the grid, that's life, man.
Yep.
But we can go back a little bit because it's a lot. Where do you start, right? There's a lot to talk about because you actually did it for how long?
6 years.
Okay.
I probably
a
bit longer, but 6 years in total.
So maybe
minusing like times I left.
Okay, so maybe we could start like before, like getting into it. Like it must have been a pretty scary, daunting step to take.
Nope.
No, you're ready.
I was very ready.
It was meant for you.
I couldn't
You couldn't do it.
I would have the hardest time. That's
What part of it?
All of
Find
it.
difficult.
I think music would be a big part.
Music?
Because I can't play music on my own, right? So like not having electricity.
Right.
I'd always need music on hand, and that's the way I live. I always need music around me.
Well, how often did you go into town to like look at the local pub and hear the band play, be around people, be around the lights?
Well, Winlaw doesn't really have a local pub.
Right.
They've got a couple restaurants that like to imitate, like pretend they're pubs sometimes. They don't really necessarily have the greatest music all the time, or at least music to my liking. But there would be shows, like house shows. There'd be like places where people would have house shows and stuff, like maybe once a month. But I definitely found living off grid, I stopped listening to music and spent more time in silence.
Okay.
For sure. Did have a little tape player, the kind you'd probably have in like elementary school. Do you remember like their little boxes?
Yep, I remember those.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Had
record on it with
yeah, exactly. Cycled through a couple of those. Had
awesome.
a few boxes of tapes, so you get into listening to a lot of Patsy Cline and Hank Williams and random thrift store tapes. Yeah. And then when we had solar panels and a battery hooked up, we had a little mini record player. So
Sweet.
sometimes we would listen to the record player.
So Kev, you're good. You got your music.
Yeah, that would be great. I could imagine, like you mentioned, Patsy Cline records and Hank Williams. That would be really cool to be able to look there in a cabin with no power, with an old record player.
Like a little bit of power. So maybe we can talk about power for a little bit. You have enough for a record player. What else can you run off?
Light bulb.
Singular? One light bulb?
It's definitely a game trying to figure out your power. We discovered you could get direct current light bulbs. So when you are on a battery, you're plugging something into this wall, it's AC power. Yep. So the power's like altered. But if you can get a DC light bulb, which you can order off Amazon, that way you can just take a lamp, cut the plug end off, and actually literally just hook the wires up to a battery.
Right.
And it sucks way less power. Right. So a DC light bulb, you could probably run it off a battery for 2 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
What about lemons? Because I for some reason, I'm just getting visions of like public school science fairs in my head. And I remember like the people like running lamps and stuff off of lemons. Now, is there any sort of like longevity to that, or is this just sort of like a flash in the pan? Stays illuminated for like a moment or two.
I can't remember. I remember that science project. I feel like there's something to do with a battery and a lemon and a light bulb.
Well, yeah, but like if you went out and bought like a bunch of say like 9-volt batteries, do you think it like I don't know. Now I feel dumb. I'm putting myself on the spot here.
I would Google that science experiment. I have no idea.
It's almost a shame we don't have like a laptop like right in front of us. I could sit here on my phone and do it.
I have no idea, but I know that we had gel batteries. There are batteries that are used for like RVs or boats.
Yep.
So you can drain them all the way and it's fine.
Yeah, gel cells. Yeah, we sell quite a few of those.
Yeah. So that's the type of batteries you use for solar. I know I would get creative. I found rechargeable light bulbs. So they're like LED light bulbs. You can buy them off Amazon and they charge by USB cable.
Oh, cool.
So you could charge them in your computer or in your wall, or we would charge it in the car when we were driving. And that way we had a little light bulb. You could like had a hook. You could hang that up. That was pretty handy for a while. But I just had candles for about 4 years.
Okay. Like is there a lot of people, like if you're going off grid, like I guess generators, because fuel, everything else, it's not really an option. I'm wondering if there's more solar powered generators out there, because that would be kind of neat. Maybe I'm sure there are.
A solar powered generator.
I'm not even sure how.
Well, I don't even know how that would work, because you use solar powers to charge your battery, so I don't know how
Yeah, I think I'm talking out my ass right now.
I don't know how a solar powered generator would work. Could you have a solar powered car?
We're gonna have to edit this part out. Well, yeah, I think I remember a Simpsons episode or two where there was a few solar powered cars. And if life has taught me anything, it's almost all, like, believe what you see in the Simpsons, because it will eventually. It's inevitable that it's going to become reality. Like they predicted Donald Trump becoming president.
Didn't they predict something else?
Oh, they've done like many predictions through time. Me and Christy were saying that we almost need a laptop here in front of us for research purposes. If we're talking, we're like, oh, well, let's Google that, because
You got your phones.
we get the facts. Like the facts of life. Do you guys remember that show? By the way, Facts of Life. Trudy. And they were all like these. Scott remembers. He's just not admitting to it right now.
Yeah, early 90s. No, late 80s.
Yeah, late 80s. It was kind of around the same time as Different Strokes. What you talking about, Willis? Remember that show?
Oh.
Gary Oldman. That's where
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Claim
That's.
to Fame and the rest of them, and well, I think both of them ended up doing drugs and ODing, the brother and the sister. I'm not even sure if the other guy's alive too. The little person. I can't remember his name, but yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember his name either.
Well, that took a turn.
Okay. Off the grid living for 6 years, living in interior British Columbia.
Coonies.
Kootenays, thank you. Which is about 50 minutes from Nelson.
Yeah.
Nelson being the closest city you would go for things you might need that you don't have on hand. But the idea is to have things on hand, of course, but time things come up.
There is a grocery store in either direction about 8 minutes away.
Cool.
Small grocery store.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Fair enough. The basics are there most of the time.
Yeah.
Cool.
Beer, cream, coffee.
Right.
Yeah.
So you did it for 6 years, so you liked it. Nobody does anything for 6 years and doesn't like it. You're giving me a face right now because, like, I'm sure there were things you didn't like, of course, because no one does anything for 6 years and have things they don't like in there as well. That's life.
Totally.
So let's ignore the stuff you didn't like.
Okay.
And that's like, what are parts of it that were kind of in that chapter of your life whenever you're old and gray and looking back, thinking about those 6 years, what's going to make you smile? What's a part of that's just like, wow, that was cool. An accomplishment or like a part of the day that was really nice.
Well, maybe because we're coming up to winter, it's like thinking about that, because I definitely enjoyed the winters, even though the cabin was pretty drafty. It would often be really cold, sitting there with the wood stove and the fire outside, and it was so quiet, just like so peaceful the snow is already makes everything so heavy and quiet, but just living there, it was like you really felt it. And I think in the winter there was a few times where we'd get big dumps of snow, and I remember going back there after Christmas. We'd been gone and the water had froze, but there was something really nice about having to go and collect the water. So our water was gravity fed, so we had no hot water, only cold water, and it was fed because we're on kind of a mountain. The water could be sucked up by the house through gravity.
Where does it come from? It's a spring?
It's a spring.
An above ground spring.
Yeah.
At a higher point.
Yeah.
Just funnel off
and
that.
it is not above ground for very long before it
Ice is over.
Before it
Goes
comes
back
into
down.
our water box.
Oh,
so it's
okay.
actually underground and then comes above ground and it's collected. So it's like the best water ever. It's amazing.
That's huge. Wow. Yeah.
But we would, it was nice when we would go out with our big buckets and trudge through the snow and then collect the water and then bring it back. It was
to the
annoying.
warm cottage and the fire.
Yeah, it's really annoying, but also you really learn to appreciate your water and kind of, I would just think about the people that would have their whole life is doing that, like walking miles a day to gather water. And so you just have an appreciation for the water.
Well,
and it's a bit of a ritual.
Interesting that you'd bring that up, because that's kind of the most important thing. We could have big, deep conversations, but really it comes down to you have to drink water and eat food sometimes or you will die. So it is kind of why we do a lot of what we do, is so we can not die and do that. So you have a life like that, and really the only thing you have to think about and you're focusing on without any distractions around you are
Getting water.
And coming back to your shelter that you created. So you are, well, self-sustaining, like, and literally you are keeping yourself alive, and that's all you have to worry about. If there are any distractions, there's something satisfying about that, I'm sure. Yeah, because you're independent. You're an independent person by nature, I would say. I think that's fair to say.
And just, I guess so. Yeah.
Well, you kind of always march.
You are an independent person.
Like, really, you have, like, all throughout high school, and then after, like, you always did what Christy. You never succumbed to what all your other friends were doing.
You're not a follower.
No.
Okay.
Which is a compliment. But maybe, do you disagree with that? Do you feel like
No.
maybe that doesn't...
No.
We're painting you with a pretty broad stroke, but, I mean... You know what, that's interesting though? People define themselves. Like, a quick way to be an asshole, to make it to be disruptive, is to define people or cultures or countries or races, anything. It's not for you to define somebody else. You know what I mean? And a quick way to make someone to be popular, for lack of a better word, is to let someone define themselves and then reinforce what it is they're presenting. It gets a little weird because sometimes people don't know who they are, but that's really quick. A quick way to make someone hate you is let them define themselves and then challenge that. Yeah.
That's a very astute
Yeah. Well, it's pretty
perspective.
Yeah, it's helped me.
No
Yeah.
way.
But because if you're in a group and you're meeting new people, that's a good one to go by. But it gets weird because sometimes it's hard to find out people how to define themselves. Sometimes it's not obvious. Like, people are messy characters and complex sometimes. So it's sometimes
Dealing with identity ish.
Sure, yeah, especially younger people. Younger people are.
I think older people do. I don't know. I still have times.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, fuck yeah. I mean, life is weird.
Figure out where I fit.
Sure.
Into the whole.
Yep.
The whole thing, the whole situation. You know, it's.
Yeah.
But it's a discovery every day, and it's a learning process, right?
Yeah, we have like these little tiny versions of ourselves that we use for in different situations, and
like different characters almost, and you can bring that sort of character out at the appropriate time.
Well, yeah. We have. I think you act differently in front of your grandma than you do your drinking buddy from high school. You know, you vary a little bit.
A little bit.
Some people don't, though.
You guys see the picture earlier. Right?
Yeah, that's right. We saw a picture of you and your grandmother. Yeah. So, you know, so obviously Christy is you're a complex person. So part of you is independent and part of you is other things. But
Totally.
So that was a nice kind of memory. And we learned a few things off that. We learned for one, that how you got your water, that it snows a lot, that it was a bit of a drafty place. You had to have a good fire.
You don't take water for granted.
Don't take it for granted, man. Yeah, and
plastic the windows, you know, wintertime, you got to plastic all the windows. I missed getting firewood this year. I really missed getting firewood. Like, you know, everything. It would always be last minute every year. You're like, I'm going to have all the firewood ready by the summertime. But you're always, you know, a week before it snows, or maybe it's snowing and you're still out chopping firewood.
Were you amazed how much firewood did you needed?
About 2 cords.
2 cords, yeah. Which is quite a bit. Like, that's a big pile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You ever got trapped inside because of the snow? Like, when it snows so much,
like an avalanche.
No. There's probably times we didn't want to leave because there'd be a lot of snow.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't want to leave, and maybe you couldn't get your car up the truck up the road. Once you left, you'd have to walk really far. That happened a few times.
Oh.
What's going on outside when the snow melts? What's around there? You have animals, you have gardens. The full deal, right? The full...
Yeah.
Like...
Big gardens, planted, all the things.
Oh, it sounds like so much work. It sounds way, way, way harder than living in a condo and having a job. It sounds
yes and no. Because I think, you know... Like one of the things I, you know, loved about it is we'd play lots of music, and you would just play music, or you would just sit and draw, but it could get limiting creatively because you're not going to be able to record music in there or do things with that take a lot of power, and some things take a lot of power, but there is something special
so the
about
lack
just sitting.
of power, electricity, is, you felt the limitations there.
It could be limiting after a while, and just spending so much time.
But I mean, you said like 30 chickens, you had ducks.
We had ducks, chickens, geese, Muscovies at one point, rabbits, 2 dogs and a cat, big garden, raspberries, blueberries, lots of herbs, lots of mint and
Did you do any trapping?
lemon balm. Never did any trapping, but I do own a crossbow.
Okay, cool.
I did get my hunting license.
Oh, good for you.
But I've never actually gone hunting yet.
I figured like you just snaring rabbits or whatever.
Well, you have your own rabbits.
We raised our own rabbits.
Well, yeah, I know, but... Yeah.
Except...
And you said they were good. Like, they made good meals.
Really good meals. Except Harold. We didn't eat Harold. I took a liking to one of the rabbits, and he's still alive right now.
So I've heard rumors, maybe you could fill me in on this, about eating rabbits and protein poisoning.
Well, you can't live off of just rabbits.
You'll poison because they're so lean. There's no fat.
You will die if you only eat rabbits.
Yeah, and I think it's like a protein poisoning or something like that, is it not? Or is this because...
I don't exactly know. I've heard that they're low in nutrition. Maybe they're low in protein. They're low in something so that
I shouldn't say protein, like fat, because they're so lean and there's no fat. They're just almost like all muscle.
So then you would maybe not be getting enough fat.
Yeah, and like I was told that you kind of have to like eat the brains and the eyes, and like in survival situations, if you're stuck out in the woods, and that's like your sense of meat or your source, of meat and everything else. They're saying like, yeah, you have to kind of eat the whole thing. You got to eat like a lot of the fatty parts to them as well.
Maybe chew on some bones.
Maybe.
Yeah, I have no idea. I've heard that you can't just live off of them, but they still make a pretty good stew.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And then the chickens are great too.
Chickens, ducks, yeah, they were all great.
Man, that's awesome.
You know,
Did you have a
We had
freezer?
bees. We had bees for a little while. We had a freezer. We'd put a freezer. So we ended up getting a freezer and putting it up at our neighbor's place. He had power.
Oh, sweet.
And so he was cool. We just gave him a couple bucks every month and had a freezer up there.
Give him a chicken or something.
Yeah, we'd cook dinners together. Yeah, play music.
at I guess this would have been a possibility. I know at my papa's place in the Laurentians, he used to have, because he built a place after he got out of the Navy, just after the Second World War. So he built a cottage up in Laurentians, right near. It's not too far near from Sever. Like, I'm not sure if you've ever been up to the cottage or you. Anyways, they dug a hole about, maybe 20, 25 feet deep. And that's where they used to keep all the food. And they built like a shed over it. Because it's cool. It's cold down there, right? And they used to have like a big basket and everything else. They would put the milk and the perishables and the meat, and they would lower it down to the ground and lock the door to the little cabin. And that was the fridge, essentially.
Yeah, that's what we had. We had a hole in the ground.
Okay, yeah.
So it started out, first we had a few little holes with just like a kind of lid, and they were kind of like bucket sized right close to the house. We experimented with a lot of different things. One of the things that I used to get annoyed with was not having a fridge. Especially because I really like cream in my coffee. But we had some holes in the back, but then we also had sort of a semi-root cellar where it got dug out and there was an insulated boards on top of it. And you would kind of just lift it up, prop it up with a stick, crawl in and get whatever it was you needed, so we could keep carrots, beets, potatoes, like all your root vegetables down there. And then I'd also store some canned goods, did a lot of canning, so kept some of that down there, and it would be good in there, and you could kind of just go in and out. Especially in the winter, snow is really good insulation, so it kept it really insulated. And then so yeah, we just had a hole in the ground and used that as a storage spot. And then sometimes we had with the water, we ran a creek through the garden, and so we would store, the beer pond, we called it, and you could keep your cream and your beer and some condiments or stuff in this creek because it's all glacial water, so the water's always running through, and we'd keep stuff in there to keep it cold. And we'd have a cooler. For a while we buried the cooler, tried to have the cooler and water running around the cooler. You experiment with a lot of different things.
Did that work, running the water around the cooler?
I don't think it actually ended up working. Yeah. I can't remember why.
Now, did it ever, so when you said you had the glacial stream running down, did you ever think about putting a water wheel in there and trying to
micro hydro?
Yeah.
Yes, that wasn't so much my department. I kind of was cool with just candles. But Jared was pretty into making that happen, but you need to get the equipment and you have to have enough water pressure for that to work.
Was there enough there, or was it?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I think you need quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think you need quite a bit. But if you're just charging your iPhone, running one light bulb and a
We
vinyl,
run a couple light bulbs, but yeah.
Still, you don't need much.
How many hamsters do you think you would need running at all times to maybe kind of
7
power? Do you think 7's a good number?
Yeah, 7 different wheels, 7 good size hamsters.
Yeah.
Because you can use a bike, right? You can charge your battery with a bicycle. No, I'm not joking.
No, I know that. I think you could probably get that off Amazon. A basic
Yeah.
I never thought of that. That's a great way to stay in shape too. You do it for an hour a day. If you go to the go do a spin class,
recharge the batteries
or some shit.
And you could recharge the battery.
Am I allowed to curse?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, yeah, you're supposed to talk like we're with high school friends.
Oh fuck!
Not.
Thank God.
Yeah. Don't talk like your grandma's in the room.
Yes, man.
Yeah. Don't.
Maybe I talk to some fucking franglais too.
I was gonna say apparently you have French high school friends.
I was I don't think so.
Most people here, except for me, live in Montreal, and so you guys, you're You're the Montrealer, huh?
I was born in Montreal. Hey, look, you know what we all have, the three of us have in common is that we all came from the same town, but also we all moved out west and stayed and planted our flags here. Where I assume that you two know other people that have, but I actually only know you two that came west from where.
Amy.
Where's
Amy's
she?
in Alberta.
But you. What?
Oh, it's out British Columbia.
West. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I know Skylar as well, and Justin and Phil, but they're all in Alberta. So you're the only two that I know that made it to British Columbia and stayed. A ton come and check it out and leave, but
Yeah, I couldn't imagine living anywhere else, personally.
myself, no. Well, yes, I can imagine myself living lots of places,
Well,
actually.
Yeah.
I
But
would
not
never
back in Glengarry.
No, and I choose my words carefully because they're the people I love that are there, and I think it's a great, really, really, really special place.
100%.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, but I just no, I wouldn't I have no business going back there. There's nothing. No, there's no way. Would you? Never say never.
Never say never. I went back there and lived there for a few months, and I enjoyed it. But then I really missed BC.
Yeah.
I missed it. I didn't know why, but I did. It crosses my mind. Who knows? All the families
say
there.
never.
But I don't feel like that's my plan. I don't see that happening.
Right.
But who knows?
Yeah. Parents get older.
Yeah.
You're close to them.
There
Yeah.
you've got fireflies.
Does it make sense that it's too confined back there? Where here, I find like BC in general, from what I've seen, like it's so expansive and so like huge and like beautiful, and it almost feels like it's limitless here, like where you can go and what you can see.
I think being on the ocean as well is a sense that.
Ocean and the forest, I feel like that's one thing when I'm like, why here? And I think there's a comfort in looking up at the mountains and seeing trees as far as you can see.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
For me, it's the
It's real wild country.
I don't think I can be away from the ocean now. Like after being here for 13 years, I need to be by the ocean. That's it. Like no matter where I live, it's got to be by the water now. And the ocean, not just like a lake, because lakes are just like whatever.
Yeah, anywhere I kind of thought of quickly, where could I live? When you ask the question, all of them, I think, were probably by the ocean around the world. But yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's just, it's life.
And I like sailing.
But there's just something about it. Like the smell, the smell of low tide now, I actually fucking enjoy it. It's...
Open ocean air clears your mind, for sure.
Yes, like the saltiness, the brininess, all of it. Like you're hearing like the seagulls and the gulls, that low hanging mist, everything about it. It's irreplaceable.
Yeah, you painted a good picture of the West Coast right there, for sure. Yeah, there's something special about it. And that's not saying it's not special back home, because it has its thing too. I found back home, I don't know,
It's
I think
greener. I find it's
back home?
Yeah, it's emerald green. Like it's a different type of green here.
The sky is different.
It's all
too.
the Roundup and the fertilizer.
You
Just
think that's
joking.
it, maybe? I don't know. Like it's
Is there Roundup in the fertilizer?
Well, there's a lot of Roundup and there's a lot of fertilizer.
Right, yeah.
I'm just
I guess
just
Roundup the
joking.
fertilizer would be pretty counterproductive for it. But I don't know. The really good people, hardworking people. I find I have this little theory that the further east you go, the deeper your connections, relationships actually get with people. And the same could be said for the further north. I don't know why that is. I think because of I think okay, I think it's pretty rare that someone says, I went to Honolulu and I just met this group of people and we became friends for life. We just had this greatest connection. It was just
Okay. Yeah.
But I could hear someone saying that conversation about the fucking Yukon or somewhere shitty, because all you have.
Yukon's really sweet, actually.
Right. So, yeah. Okay. Someone from Yukon's like, fuck you. Somewhere that is cold and you will die if you don't wear clothes.
Well, like you'd rarely hear people going to the Maritimes and saying, "Oh, the people are awful." You usually hear, "I went to the Maritimes and the people there are so amazing."
Yeah.
Well, yeah, for the simple fact that for maybe a good 6 to 7 months of the year, you're indoors with these people.
I think there's something to that.
To do anything else, so you're going to go to a pub, you're going to go to someone's house, you're going to go to a bar.
Yeah.
You're going to get a group of people. You're going to have
go in the basement, start a band.
You're going to do all that stuff.
You're right.
Is what's very common and prevalent in like East Coast.
It might be as simple as that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's weather. Here, it's nice.
Yeah. Or southern latitudes.
So people are more isolated.
Yeah.
Do you think BC's more isolating?
Well, or it's just you're not stuck together. You could just go and walk a trail for the West Coast Trail by yourself. You could.
Well, exactly. Or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're in the interior, you could go riding. You could be. You're not like.
Somebody visits the West, they usually come back and talk about the mountains and the ocean and the trees.
Exactly.
Then don't usually talk about the people so much. Now, obviously I live here and I married one. I mean, I love West Coast people, but I think they would agree with me.
No, I definitely think I agree with that for sure.
Like even when you're out riding for the day here, or you Whistler or wherever, you're outdoors.
You're connected to nature.
You're doing something where the East Coast, like Newfoundland.
If you're in Sudbury, you're connected to people, because if you're not, what are you connected to?
You're not snowboarding in PEI. You're not snowboarding in Newfoundland. Like you're not doing those kind of like winter sports, or where you're just out doing things.
Yeah.
I
think it's as simple as that.
You're drinking.
Like when I went to Tromsø, which is the most northern city in the world, it's in the Arctic Circle, in Norway. I got that sense when you're at a pub beside somebody, you just kind of look at each other like, hey, how's it going? Like, we're on the edge of the earth here together. It's the Arctic just outside. You have this like instant kind of connection.
Lottery.
Yeah.
You got to be friends, because in any split moment it could be
kind of like island living. It's like
fighting
accountability.
together.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
behave.
like showing up in like Churchill, Manitoba, or places like that, right? Like you rely on your community.
Sure.
To and you take care of each other. Whereas here, there's some sort of community, but at the same time,
Usually it's gated communities.
Yeah.
People more want to keep you out opposed to taking you in here.
yeah,
Maybe.
okay.
Maybe. But yeah, like places harsh like Churchill and stuff like that. You're right. Your reputation is almost your survival is dependent on your reputation. Old tribes were like that.
So I don't know. For some reason, it just popped into my head. Would any of you two, if you ever, well, you said you went to the Yukon. Did you do the whole toe thing?
I didn't actually do the shot with the toe. I really wanted to go to that bar, and I actually got in a fight with my partner at the time about it, because it was a thing, but it's kind of a tourist thing. So he was like, I don't want to go to that. That's just like some stupid tourist thing. But I was like, yeah, but we're here. I want to do it. We actually kind of got in a fight about it, but we never actually went and did it.
Okay. I guess some dude ate the toe.
Someone ate the toe, and then now there's a fine if you eat the toe. It costs $3,000. But they got another toe.
The fuck would you eat the toe? Like, what do you think the toenail's like? Do you think it's like, you think it has like, it maybe had like nail fungus before? Remember that commercial?
Well, fungus can't grow in vinegar, and this was it's pickled. Oh God.
What kind of pickle do you think? Do you think it's like a sweet or a salty pickle?
I bet she was really salty and really bitter, briny and salty, and because you can't put something that's been in formaldehyde in your shot. You can't put that in your shot.
I think if I had to do that, I think I would put kaffir lime leaves, maybe some lemongrass in it, and a tiny bit of ginger. I think if I was to pickle my toe for people to do shots of, I think I would go for like some really cool, like far out Southeast Asian flavors in the brine. Like,
Sorry, my dog is crying, so I had to go and see what was up, and I came back. What the fuck are we talking about?
so we're talking about the toe, right? In the bottle, like the
So in the
thing.
Yukon, there's a tourist thing where, so a gold miner, lost his toe. His toe got amputated or fell. And so he donated it to this bar so you could go to this bar and do a shot with, you put the toe in the shot, and so you got to kiss the toe as you're doing the shot. It's been going on for a long time, but then apparently somebody ate
I
the
think I know
toe.
where this is going. Oh, okay.
They ate the toe.
They ate the toe recently, like in the last 10 years.
Gross.
But they have apparently
Is that
lots of
somebody, Kevin
toes, lots of toes on layaway. Like a lot of people have donated their toe to this
Oh,
bar.
my dear Lord. So a gold miner?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just saying.
I know a funny gold miner story.
If I had to pickle my toe,
Yes.
like I was just saying, like I'd want to go for some like cool exotic Southeast Asian flavors where I would put like some kaffir lime, some lemongrass,
Right.
ginger, maybe.
It's not very gold rushy though. You know, this is the Yukon. Like I'd, pickle it with some like wild leeks and
I don't know.
Can I tell my gold?
yes.
Please.
So I was an old prospector, a gold miner, and I don't remember his name, so we'll call him Kevin Robson for the story. Is that okay?
Good name.
Anyway, so Kevin Robson, the gold miners, the thing is back then they'd be in these like mines, and he'd be there for weeks, sometimes months, and there's no natural light. It was near the Yukon, and so he'd go in there for months, and he'd come back all full of soot and black, lonely as all hell. And then you go in the Yukon, there's this pub there. Maybe it's the same one. And so Kevin Robson would go into the pub and talk to the barkeep and say, "Hey, barkeep, I'm only flesh and blood. I've been in the mine for, God, a month this time. I need a woman." So the barkeep says, "Look, sorry, man, we just don't have anything like that around here. Sorry." The gold miner's name is not Kevin Robson. So let me push on. Sorry. So anyway, so the gold miner says, says, "No, look, I need a woman." And the bartender says, "Well, look, there is Kevin Robson who lives up the street." And the barkeep, and then the barkeep says, "You could, it's Kevin Robson if you like." And he said, "No, Jesus, crying out loud. No, thanks."
Yeah, I think Kevin Robson would have said Jeebus.
Kevin Robson's not there. He's we don't know where he is.
I know the guy.
Anyway, so he goes back to the mine, and this time he's there for 2 months. And he comes back, and he's back into Yukon. He talks to the barkeep, and he says, "Barkeep, I'm just flesh and blood, and I've been there for 2 months, and I need a lady." And the barkeep says, "I'm sorry, but nothing like that around here. But there's old Kevin Robson up the street."
Hell of a guy.
And then the gold miner's like, "Barkeep, as long as you don't tell anybody, I mean nobody, well, I'm just flesh and blood, and if you tell me that Ken Robson up the street is the only one, well, all right, fine." And the barkeep
Clean as a whistle.
and the barkeep says, "Well, okay, but hey, listen, let's see, 3 people are gonna know. No, 4 people are gonna know." He's like, "Wait, how's that?" He's like, "Well, I'm gonna know. You're gonna know. Kevin Robson's gonna know. And the guy that has to hold down Kevin Robson's gonna know."
Yeah, I know that one. Pretty good.
That has nothing to do with anything.
No, there's been some weird, some weird stories about the Yukon.
So in the end, you weren't a homosexual. You were raped.
Yeah, sorry, did you call me a homosexual?
But you were raped.
Oh, well.
I don't think Christy followed the...
I did. I don't like it.
All right, go back to living off the grid.
Oh, do you read the paper a lot, Christy?
The newspaper?
Yeah.
Newspaper? No.
No? So I do occasionally. This morning was one of those days. And I was reading, did you hear, I don't know, I think it was somewhere in the southern U.S. this morning, there was a huge fire at the circus. Did you hear about it?
Is this a joke? No.
No, it apparently was intense.
God. That was worse than mine.
I like that one better, though.
That was culturally offensive.
Christy, do you know how you find Will Smith in the snow? You follow the Fresh Prince.
You got nervous there for a second.
Well, coming from me, you know, I can understand her a little bit of apprehension at first, but you know, that's not that's the Kevin of yonder. That's not the Kevin of future.
All right, so we covered. What did we cover? We're gonna wrap it up.
No, not at all. I was just gonna step away for 2 minutes.
Well, let's tie it all up. What do we do? What do we learn today? What do we learn from this podcast?
One of the things that I wanted to tell you guys, but I figured now would be a really good time.
Yeah.
So Thursday evening, I was listening to New Music Friday, like one of my favorite days, but I kind of cheat and do it Thursday evening on Spotify. It seems they're on Eastern Time Standard instead of Western Time. Anyways. So, apparently Marilyn Manson released his own version.
The End?
The End, yeah. It's cool, and it kind of got me thinking about the Doors. And I was like, fuck, man, I haven't listened to the Doors.
Marilyn Manson covers The End?
Yeah.
Can we watch it after?
Yeah.
Listen to it. So, anyways, I started listening to The End, the original extended 12-minute version or whatever it was. And I was just like on Wikipedia, and I was just like, you know, I don't really know that much about Jim Morrison outside of the Val Kilmer movie, because I was like, man, the Doors, fucking hippies, punk rock.
They weren't hippies at all. They are far from hippies.
Well, yeah,
Being rock and roll and being a hippie are two very different things.
They keep that bohemian sort of eccentric sort of style he was, but I guess same thing as like Kerouac, which I wouldn't consider a hippie, or Hunter S. Thompson or Burroughs, all of those people. Anyways, did you guys know that his father was a rear admiral in the U.S. Navy?
Jim Morrison?
Yeah, Jim Morrison.
That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I knew that. I knew he was in the military anyway,
He
up
was
there.
a rear admiral in the U.S. Navy. He commanded aircraft carrier fleets in Vietnam during the Vietnam War.
Wow.
And I did not know that.
I didn't realize he was so prominent.
Yeah, he's I was very surprised. I was like, wow. And even Jim Morrison's like background, like going to UCLA and like film and everything else, like he wasn't just another fucking idiot.
No, he wasn't an idiot. I thought he was cool at one stage. I think I was a late teens. I was like, hey, that's a cool guy, but I don't know if I think that anymore. But definitely an interesting entertainer in his day.
For sure.
In his time, yeah. But I think he, see that like the whole like losing yourself in drugs, and I don't romanticize that at all anymore.
But really, he wasn't into doing opiates. He was into doing psychedelics. Like he was never doing cocaine, hard drugs like that.
I think he was.
Really?
Yeah, he was.
I thought it was just booze, and I thought booze killed him. He was just a raging.
No, he overdosed.
That's probably true too. But.
He was a raging alcoholic, but he did overdose.
Was it like he OD'd on opiate? I thought it was almost like alcohol poisoning or alcohol.
I think he thought it was cocaine, but it actually was heroin.
Okay.
Well, this is a good way to like tie things up, actually, because it rounds back to the very first thing we're talking about is like those ladies that I really admired. It's not so much what they did, which is great too, but it's how they conducted themselves. And I find like people who I admire now, that's what I look at, is like how you conduct yourself in life. And I don't know I can give Jim Morrison high points in that regard.
Well,
so
none of those people, man. Like you say something about Kurt Cobain, which I really don't give a shit about anyways. But like...
Exactly. Yeah, no. I just...
Like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin... Hunter S. Thompson, all of those, like, Hunter S. Thompson didn't sort of conduct himself.
I fucking hate Hunter S. Thompson.
In
me
any
too.
Sort of way.
Fuck
like,
that guy.
He was a misogynistic
Pedophile.
No.
Yep.
I never heard that before, but
Look it up.
Okay, I will. But I never liked him. I felt like because in the circles that I run in, you have to. It's like not an option. You have to just love Hunter S. Thompson. But like, I'm like, fuck that. It just doesn't work for me. It's easy to give up. To me, that's what I see. Someone who has enough money where they could just fucking dive into, drugs and alcohol. And I don't know. That's giving up. That's letting go. That's not hanging on.
Some of those people, those artists that you look at, like Kurt Cobain, Janis Joplin, I feel like potentially there was maybe some mental health stuff there. There could have been some bipolar disorder, some borderline personality disorders. And generally, if you listen to the best music in the world, you see signs of a insecure attachment style or some potentially symptoms of mental health. So these like songs about dying without someone, needing someone, loving someone so bad, hurting someone so bad, all these artists base their creativity and what came out was really based on deep intense emotions. All these artists had very strong intense feelings and intense emotions, and if you walk in this world with those feelings and those like deep feelings and emotions, generally you will gravitate to things to numb those emotions. So these artists that are so great and like can captivate so many people, I think they feel things very heavily, and so that is why a lot of times they will also have addiction problems. And addiction is also a symptom of mental health.
I think that had a real ring of truth. I think you're dead on. I wouldn't argue that, but what I would add to that is that I'd say, okay, but it's not something to be admired. Oh,
definitely. Yeah. You shouldn't admire. You can admire the creativity, and you can admire the passion.
Of course.
But drug addiction has been glorified.
Young people get into that to imitate that.
Totally. Listen to Lou Reed's Heroin, and it sounds so sexy, cool and sexy, but that's not a glorified.
That's kind of what
that's the myth of rock and roll.
Well, look at the Stones, man. Like, look at all of it. It's.
I think it's
the story of rock and roll.
I think that's the myth of rock and roll. I think actually hard work and dedication. I think it's like stuff like this. Doesn't sound very sexy, but I think if you can do great in rock and roll, it's because of being able to hold relationships together with your bandmates, being able to.
I think it's the total opposite.
Well, I think that's just that it makes for a better movie. What you're kind of edging towards, but
like look at Elvis, Little Richard, like all like the massively like Bowie.
Elvis got really sad. Yeah, and he was addicted to food.
Elvis is a great example of drugs, and like that way ruined him.
Admired, definitely not.
Yeah. Anyway. What do you say?
It kind of almost like seems like that is the rock and roll story, and that's
it is. It's a story.
It's a myth. I would say it's the truth because that's what happens.
That's what ruins rock and roll.
Amy Winehouse
ruins it.
Billie Holiday, addicted to drugs. Etta James.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we could talk all night. But we could talk all night about like all the examples of it. But these are examples of great artists that have been ruined via drugs and alcohol.
Was it fame that brought it on, or was it just something else that was going on inside of them already?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to speculate. Kind of again, rounding back again, it's hard to define somebody. It's for them to define themselves. Unfortunately, they're not around to do that.
I think it's weird. I think fame and money changes people.
For sure.
And I don't just mean in like the music entertainment industry. You look at sports. You look at the NFL, for example. You look at people who come from a different social economic background than the rest of us. A lot of them who come from low income ghettos and stuff. And once they get that little bit of money, they run wild. You look at half of these football players, and the drugs and the booze and like the gangs and like the domestic violence. It's crazy. And I think a lot of it has to do with people weren't educated on how to handle fame, fortune.
Well, there's an expression that it's lonely on top. It's lonely when you're on top, and that's true. Like, you think even like in a corporation, say you want to climb the ladder, and you think, well, I'd like to be the big upper management guy. That looks good. I realize that my peers might think I'll lose connection to them, but then I guess I'll be friends to the other upper management guys. But actually, the truth is that as you climb that, I mean, use the corporation as an example, but it can be for the whole world, right? So as you climb to that, so you get to the upper management, what happens is, actually it gets quite lonely, because those connections you had when you're on the floor, let's say on the tools or whatever, they were really deep connections, really like real relationships. But as you climb up, the relationships you have, you lose those. And the relationships you have get more and more and more skin deep. And the higher you get, it gets pretty lonely. If you get high enough, you really have no one. Like, just nobody loves, like, there's no real. So it's hard. So like the more success you get generally, the less love you receive, the less like real connections you have, just like that corporation.
And
so you have to be able to deal and handle. You have to be able to be alone. That's why you could probably be great, Christy, being fabulously successful, because you know what it's like
to be alone.
Well, 6 years, man, in the
awesome
woods.
Okay, make me famous.
Or just famous, but I mean, like, really, really successful. I think you could probably handle that psychologically, because you have to be able to deal with people being weird, distant, or losing those connections. But anyway, hey, what do you say we wrap this up?
Yeah, let's do it.
I thought that was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I didn't even get to touch on Don Cherry, but that we'll say that one for another time.
Or peeing in jars.
Or beer cases in a
The big part of living off grid was peeing in jars.
Like was it
Because you didn't want to walk out to the outhouse in the winter.
It was cold in the winter. Sometimes you'd pee in a jar.
So
and urine is a really great fertilizer for your garden. So sometimes...
Nitrogen, right?
Yeah, high nitrogen.
So it's very Trailer Park Boys, like piss jugs and shit.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about the peeing in the jar. So what about Don Cherry? Do you want to wrap that up?
No, it's a really probably touchy, deep.
It doesn't have to be. You just, how do you feel about that?
I think he kind of got a shitty end of the deal.
I think so too.
But
he's 85 years old, crying out loud.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, he got fired from Coach's Corner and CBC and everything else.
Don Cherry got fired from Coach's... Don Cherry's still alive?
Yeah, he said something really stupid.
Yeah.
But like... I don't know.
He didn't. I don't think he personally meant it the way it came out.
Did he, like, what did he say?
So he was very upset, and this was like his Remembrance Day thing. And so he came out and he was commenting, because he lived in the Toronto, Mississauga area, and he was going on, and he was just like, at the ceremonies, he was really upset, and he goes, you people, I don't see you people wearing poppies anymore. You come to our country, and you enjoy our freedoms, and you enjoy the milk and honey that we provide here, but you can't even take the time or to spend the 5
I saw
cents
something
to
about this.
honor our fallen soldiers who provided these freedoms and everything else that this country provides, and you come here. I think that he
So he was pinpointing a certain demographic that doesn't wear that.
New immigrants
that don't wear poppies. Okay.
I don't know. I guess maybe that's what he meant, but to me, like,
sure, that's what he meant.
Yeah,
there's no question. But like, he's 85, man.
Yeah,
and it wasn't hatred. It came out of love for the soldiers and everything.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And isn't it, think about what where he considering how his upbringing, like that, where the time he grew up in, and the time we're in now. It must be weird for poor old 85-year-old anybody. Kind of weird.
And Don Cherry is such a legend. Like, really, like, his whole huge career, you're gonna fire him for that? Like,
it doesn't feel right.
McLean, his buddy,
threw him under the bus.
McLean threw him under the fucking bus, man.
No.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
No way.
Oh yeah.
What did he do?
Ron was like, Don was wrong, and I stand behind where, sports and hockey are supposed to be inclusive for everybody, and what he said was not.
That's just saying, obviously he could have said it maybe in a kinder way, but at the same time, it's Don Cherry, like...
An 84-year-old guy, all the people that taught him, they're dead. Whenever he's a young person, like the people that taught him, there's always like, he's poor old 85-year-old anybody are all by themselves. Like, what are you talking about? What's right? What's wrong?
Yeah.
But they told me. Well, they're dead.
I feel like that could get into a conversation about respecting your elders, because I see it being a mature student going back to school and a lot of sensitivity from the students. So I'm like, oh, the teacher, they said this, and there'll be like one little thing that's kind of like,
oh, really?
Big deal.
Apparently,
like,
campuses are insane with like political correctness.
Yeah.
This could be like another.
And I think we need to be kind and respectful of everybody, but at the same time we can respect our elders and understand that like humans are humans and not nitpick every little thing.
Yeah.
There's like blatant racism, but there's also just sometimes, Yeah.
The people, they are the way they are, the set generation, that's what they grew up with. You don't condone it, but at the same time, they're old. They're not going to be around for that much longer. It's not like they're...
I don't know who would be offended.
Propagating it.
Yeah.
It's not like they're standing up there on a podium spouting hate speech. They might say a stupid thing every once in a while. And like you said, there are elders, right? They come from a different time.
And you can correct it with love and kindness opposed to shame, because shaming is never going to actually include anybody.
Since my last joke didn't land very well, I'll wrap it up with another quick one. What's the difference? Don't kill my punchline.
Don't worry.
Because maybe she hasn't heard this one yet. What's the difference between a garbanzo bean and a chickpea?
Fuck, that's my joke.
I told you that one, and we'll talk about that later.
Okay,
I'll tell you the difference between a garbanzo bean and a chickpea. Kevin Robson has never paid to watch a garbanzo bean. That's the podcast, guys. Thanks for listening.
that's great. It's kind of like my joke, but it's different.
It's not your joke, man. That's not the first time you stole my jokes either.
Brianna told me that joke.
I hope you guys have recording that part. I really hope that was recorded. Come on, man. That's not the first
I've always heard of it as
time.
what's the difference between a chickpea and a kidney bean? Nobody pays to have a kidney bean on their chest.
It's garbanzo bean. Because garbanzo bean and a chickpea are the same thing.
Or a kidney bean.
Oh, nice.
Steal my joke, get that.
Okay, really hope you had that. I wish that you gotta have faith to be a gambling man. Love's like the risky game of shaking in your hands. You bet with your money like you bet with your heart. You don't count the odds, then you wind up in the dark. You don't count the odds, then you wind up in the dark. But some will bluff and some will fold and some will beat you down. Some will cheat you, burn and turn to keep that luck around. You count your chips and believe that there is a winning hand. That's what will keep you a gambling man. That's what will keep you a gambling man. And some folks will fold just to stay in the game. They all wind up blind and losing just the same. Watching all they tried to save slowly disappear. You don't risk it all, then you lose out to the fear. You don't risk it all, then you lose out to the fear. You've been doubting your dealer that's been dishing out your cards. Been running so long and you ain't getting very far. You throw your hands up and say that's it, I'm done. And then your cards get dealt, but another man has won. cards get dealt, but another man has won. And some folks will hold with an ace in their hands, bet all they got and hold out till the end, waiting on that river to know if it's meant to be. They rather drown, lose, and go all in just to see. Rather drown, lose, and go all in just to see. But some will bluff and some will fold and some will beat you down. Some will cheat you, burn and turn and keep that luck around. You count your chips and believe that there is a winning hand. That's what will keep you a gambling man. That's what will keep you a gambling man. Gotta have faith to be a gambling man. Love's like the risky game that's shaking in your hands. You bet with your money like you bet with your heart. You don't count the odds, then you wind up in the dark. You don't count the odds, then you wind up